So, welcome to the Future of Wellbeing podcast with me, Rob Stevenson, and I am beyond delighted. I'm normally delighted, but I'm beyond delighted to be chatting to Jen Fisher, Deloitte's Chief Wellbeing Officer. Jen, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here and beyond delighted to be here also.
Thank you. You didn't have to say that. So, you are the world's first Chief Wellbeing Officer, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
I don't know if I can claim the world's first, but certainly one of the first. I'll go with that.
One of the first.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how long have you been serving in that position?
Just over 8 years, actually. And I don't even know if you know this, but recently Rob transitioned into a different role, which is actually human sustainability leader, which I think we're going to talk about, which in my mind is kind of the evolution or an evolution of the future of well-being, kind of where it's going. And so I took that step to pass on the baton to someone else, and try to build the future for us. But we can talk about that as we get into conversation today.
Definitely keen to do that. Well, congratulations, and I'm keen
Thank
to
you.
hear much more about your views on human sustainability and why that's an evolution. Um, I'd like to start with your recent TEDx talk, and congratulations.
Thank you.
I've watched it a couple of times now. It was TEDx Miami, and there's a bit that really resonated with me where you're talking about your overcoming your challenges with cancer and then battling your challenges with burnout,
Hmm.
and you found it easier to be kind to yourself and recover with cancer than you did with burnout, and easier to talk about cancer with people because it's visible. And it really struck me, that there's so many people out there experiencing challenges with burnout and the invisible mental health challenges that go with it, and yet don't feel that they're safe enough to talk about it. Talk us through that experience a little bit, Jen.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I was preparing for the TED Talk and the story, I knew that was a bit of a provocative thing
Mm.
to say, because when you think about something like cancer, it's a life-threatening illness. And so I honestly was a little bit worried about, would that send the wrong message? But the truth is that was my experience. And that's not to diminish anybody that has struggled with cancer and the far too many that have passed away
For
from
sure.
cancer.
Yeah.
But in the workplace, in particular, but I also think just broader in society, the message that I was trying to send is that when we struggle with our mental health, whether that be burnout, which doesn't actually have a concrete medical diagnosis, or any other mental illness that does have a medical diagnosis, but that isn't immediately visible, it was harder for me,
Mm.
especially with burnout, because I think there's so many people that still today, even though we're talking about it, so many people are experiencing it. There's just a lot of people that still question whether it is real
Mm.
or whether it is just exhaustion or whether it is people just being lazy, right? And this belief that, in particular, burnout and perhaps even common mental illnesses that are highly linked to burnout, like depression, like anxiety, that, if you take a rest over the weekend or you take a vacation, or, I kind of said in jest in the TED Talk that if you take a company sponsored yoga class, but those were real things that were said to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without this recognition that, yeah, it's great to rest on the weekend. And it is absolutely, you should take a vacation. And yes, company sponsored yoga classes are awesome too,
Mm. Yeah.
but they aren't going to fix the root cause of what's causing burnout, especially in the workplace. But I think generally in the way that we are living our lives. I know the World Health Organization definition of burnout is strongly linked to the workplace. I
Yeah.
think that our work and our lives are so integrated, perhaps sitting on top of each other, that burnout could be caused by many, many factors of life, maybe just the places that it's showing up more is in the workplace. And so the reason that I did that, even though it was a little bit provocative, was to really shine a light on, hey, there are a lot of invisible things that were going on, because I even shared pictures of me going through burnout, and you would look at me and I'm in a suit and I'm
Yeah.
polished and I, you know, for all intents and purposes, look like I've got it all together. But
Yeah.
on the inside, I was a disaster, and I was hiding that. And I was afraid to ask for help because I looked around and I was like, wow, everybody else has got it together. Like, you know, I had imposter syndrome. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I can't cut it, you know. And so I processed burnout as personal failure.
Mm.
And so that's part of the reason that I also didn't ask for help, that somehow I had done something wrong to end up where I ended up.
It's
And
really interesting, isn't it? Sorry
yeah,
to
yeah,
interrupt you there. That you wouldn't feel like you'd done something wrong when you were diagnosed with cancer,
exactly.
but then with burnout, you're thinking, well, I'm a failure, so I can't talk about this,
Right.
and that's the difference, isn't it? And it's really interesting. Why do you think you felt like that? Is it because of what society tells us as how we're supposed to behave in the workplace?
I think, but I also think it's just, you know, through so many people's research, including Deloitte's research, is that you know, especially in cultures of high performance in the workplace, we've all gotten really good at pretending to show up and show up well, right? And
Yeah.
especially in a largely now kind of virtual or remote world, it's even, you know, easier, if that's the right word, to hide some of these things that are going on in our personal lives. And so it's you kind of get that social media view of people's lives of, wow, everybody must be doing great. And people say that all the time to me
Yeah.
now because of my own social media and all the things that they see me doing. Like, wow, Jen, you're out there, you're doing amazing things, you know, like, but you know what? I still have shitty days.
Yeah.
I still have bad days. I still struggle with anxiety. I still, you know, and so, you know, even on my own social media, I do try to put things out there, you know, to
Mm.
talk about the struggles that I have, you know, caring for my mother who has Alzheimer's, through, you know, my own, you know, I try to be open and vulnerable. But if you look at my own social media, people are probably like, yeah, Jen's killing it. She's out there doing amazing things. And yes, and
Yes, and
yes, and
that's right. And we've all got the and you and I are very open about our ands, but a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
people will hide the ands and just portray that I'm bulletproof and I can do this because that is high performance. And I was reflecting on this. I often talk about LeBron James in my keynotes, and LeBron
mm,
spends about $1 million on his well-being and has had a career at the top of the NBA for 20 years, but sleeps for 10 hours a night, has a 2-hour nap every day, and you know our elite corporate athletes think that we've got to push, 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 and it's no
hmm.
wonder the burnout numbers are rising, right? If we've got that attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's why we, you know, I mean, this whole notion of rest and recovery, which we've been talking about for years, but
Mm.
still hasn't really been ingrained into our brains and our behaviors, or into the corporate world or the working world, as something that is necessary and should be celebrated, right? And I think you all do it a lot better than we do. You know, over in Europe, I do think you do it a little bit better than
Yeah.
we do here in the U.S. But just, you know, just in general, I think it's not only giving ourselves permission. I do think that there needs to be organizational changes. I think there's barriers that need to be looked at and removed. I do think that rest and recovery is something that needs to be celebrated and given permission for at the organizational levels, and we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But if you do look at these athletes, actually, they'll tell you that rest is actually more important than training, because when you get to that you know, elite level, right, you have the skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so you keep training, but actually what helps you to perform is not the, you know, continued training, it's actually the recovery.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I,
Yeah.
I I was smiling there because I had just a personal example of about an hour and a half ago. that I've had a few intense meetings today, and I'd got this recording this afternoon and a pitch just beforehand, and I thought I need a break, so I went and got into bed and lay down, and my wife popped her head in because we are both working at home, and she said, "What are you doing?" And it was just like I was the naughty schoolboy, that I was doing something I shouldn't, and I'm like, "I'm having a nap." She was like, "Why?" I said, "Because I really need one, because I've got some important stuff," and I think. Yeah, I love my wife. She's brilliant, but that attitude, and it's ingrained, is that's like a guilty pleasure, or I'm being lazy, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm working on being my best for the important things that are in my afternoon. I
Yeah.
think we need a bit more of that, don't we?
We absolutely do, and I talk about that as well in my TEDx talk. That why do we give ourselves this permission to rest when we have a diagnosis like cancer, but not when we
Mm.
are struggling with something like burnout or any just being. I mean, I would advocate for rest long before you're starting to feel burnout,
Yeah.
or starting to feel overwhelmed or exhausted or any of those things. But again, it goes back to this notion of we've never done that, right? Or we've just never given our permission. Or there's a lot of conversation now about like framing it as like being lazy is good, and I actually don't even like that framing around being lazy, because why is it being lazy, right? Like, I
Mm.
don't think we should frame rest and recovery as being lazy. I think we should frame rest and recovery as critical and necessary. And so I'm glad that we're talking about rest and recovery. I don't like the fact that we're talking about it in kind of the terms of being lazy.
No, absolutely not. But
Yeah.
it's an essential component of fueling high performance and
Hmm.
sustainable performance, which we'll come on to, right? One more personal question for you on burnout. How did you know you were experiencing burnout rather than just being exhausted? What was the sort of the thought process that actually this is more than just tiredness?
It's a great question. I don't think I did.
Right.
Because like I said before, I processed it as failure. So I knew that there was something wrong. And it was almost 9 years ago when I went through burnout. And so we weren't talking about burnout in the workplace the way that we are now. And so I really didn't have any idea. I knew there was something wrong. People that, cared about me and loved me were pointing out that there were things wrong. You just spoke about your wife, my husband, but we don't ever listen to our spouses, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, but, I mean, I think looking back now, signs and symptoms were, I was exhausted all the time, but I
Mm,
typically couldn't sleep at night, because I had a
yeah.
lot of anxiety.
Mm,
My relationship with food changed. Either I would very much overeat, or I would go long periods of time without
right.
eating at all. My relationship with people and humans that I cared about, I retreated from them. My relationship with exercise, which I am one of those weirdos that really enjoys exercise.
Mm,
I stopped exercising. So my
yeah.
behaviors were significantly changing. And the narrative in my head was just power through, just power
Yeah.
through, just push through, you'll get to the other side of this. And I never got to the other side of it. So for me, it got to the point where it wasn't a intentional choice that I made to pull back. My body and my brain said, "Okay, stupid, if you're not going to do something about
Yeah.
it, we're going to do it for you." And so it got to the point where I just couldn't physically or mentally engage in life or work in any meaningful way. And so I had to step back and take that time off. And so my goal has now been, or my mission has now been, to help people recognize when they're going down that path so that you don't have to get to that point. Because I do think that burnout it's like I guess it's the metaphor. Is it the frog in the boiling pot of water?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so burnout is a lot like that, right? It's not like one day you're not burnt out and the next day you are. It is kind of this slow boil, right? And to the point where if you don't recognize some of these things as they're happening or along the way, then you will get to the point where it is really bad. And
Yeah.
those are the types of things we need to start recognizing and giving ourselves permission to recognize, because burnout isn't a failure. It's not on
No.
on any level.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of my good friend and fellow campaigner Jeff McDonald.
Yeah.
if you know Jeff, talks about, take care of your wellness, or otherwise you will be forced to take care of your illness. And I
Absolutely.
think, we have a choice before we get to burnout. Once burnout comes, the choice is probably taken away from us for a while, isn't it?
Hmm.
The other bit that it sort of resonates for me is this gift of self-reflection. All of the things you spoke about there are the drivers of your well-being: your exercise, your nutrition,
Yeah,
your social connections. And I think if we can notice our relationship with all of those things and notice when they change, we can then get an early warning that there might be a
ab-
problem, that we might need to
absolutely.
back off,
Yeah,
do more,
it's
reach out.
critically important. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's not to say, look, I mean, there are days now that I don't feel like working out. So I
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
but like I give myself that permission. But if it goes on for a period of time or starts to really interfere with your life and kind of who you are and how you normally would live your life, then
Yeah.
it's a problem. That's true with any mental health diagnosis or any mental illness diagnosis, right? Is that as it starts to interfere more and more with your life, that's really so it's not about the one day that you don't feel like working out or the one
Yeah.
day that you eat the red velvet cupcake, which I love.
Now you're talking. A red velvet cupcake. Yeah, I like that.
Like those things are normal, natural, human. Give yourself permission for that.
Yeah, yeah. There's got to be space for cupcakes, Jen. There's got to be space for it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
always.
So, in the spirit of self-reflection, as you can see, my background, I'm an 8 out of 10 on the form score. I would put that down to actually exercise as well. I'm exercising again after long COVID challenges are receding,
Yeah,
which is great news. Thank you. Slept well. I'm feeling really connected to people I care about right now, and I've been working with a new therapist that is not helping me with my mental illness. It's helping me think about how I want to show up in the world, which is just transformational for my relationships in a really positive way. Um,
awesome.
I'm not a 9 out of 10 because I've got I'm going on vacation next week and I've still got quite a lot to do in not enough time, as you know what that's like.
It'll still be waiting for you when you get back, though. You do
It's
know that,
it
right?
will still be waiting. Yeah, it will still be waiting. So overall very good form. But what about you? What's your score today and why?
I would say I'm an 8 out of 10 as
Good.
well.
Yeah.
I had a good night's sleep. Things are going well. I don't, I mentioned before, my mother,
Mm.
we're caring for her who has Alzheimer's. We're very fortunate to have her in an assisted living facility that takes incredible care of her. So that
Mm.
does take a lot of the worry and the stress off, and we're grateful. And don't uh uh, for one moment or for one day recognize how privileged we are to do that.
Mm.
But it's a really difficult disease to watch a loved
Yeah.
one go through, and so unfortunately now it's always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
So that it does wear on you. But then at the same time, there's lots of other things that are keeping me up and engaged, and
Mm.
spent time with friends the other night on a school night, which
Good.
I never do. We went
Yeah.
out, we got home at 9:30 p.m., which I don't normally even do that on a Friday or Saturday night. So I guess my social calendar is full.
Very
and
good.
work is good, and I'm here talking to you, Rob, so that
Oh,
makes the day worth it, right?
thank you. Thank you so much. So look, your TED talk was partly around your personal stories and partly around your view on well-being in the workplace. And as we consider the future of well-being, what was the message you really wanted to get across from a workplace perspective, in your talk?
Yeah, I think there were a few. I think the first and most important one is that well-being needs to become a critical like part of the leadership skill set of
Mm.
any leader. And when I say leader, I mean any person that leads other human beings or, quite frankly, interacts with other human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And this is just not a skill set. I mean, we tend to have always thought of these things as soft skills.
Yeah.
Even the soft skills, though related to and also enhance well being, Well-being still really isn't taught as a skill set. And many organizations that are well-intended, that are focused on well-being, we're teaching people about how to take care of their individual well-being. We're
Yeah.
not teaching people about, okay, yes, take care of your individual well-being. As a leader and a colleague, what does that look like within the parameters of a team, within the culture of a team? And then also, what does that look like at an organizational level? And I
Yeah.
think that that is critically important. And that's a skill set that needs to change. And it needs to be just as important as operational skill sets,
Mm.
financial skill sets, other, I mean, like we need to be, we have long-term plans when it comes to finance, when it comes to operations, when it comes to technology. We don't have long-term plans when it comes to workforce well-being.
Mm.
We don't think about it through that lens, right? And so really elevating that to a true leadership skill set and what does that look like at every level of the organization was one thing. And I talk about it as human skills, right?
Yeah. Let's
That,
let's stay on that for a
yeah,
second, Jen, if we
yeah.
can, because I think um, I'm curious as to your view as to why you think that skill set doesn't exist, and presumably linked to the fact that well-being would have been seen as a soft issue or a benefits issue or something to support people when they're struggling issue. Um, two questions really. Why do you think that is the case, and is it helpful then to build that connection between well-being and performance so leaders understand if we want a sustainable high performing team over the long term, we cannot afford to ignore well-being? Bit of a leading question, but keen to hear your view on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of those things, but I would say, why hasn't it been a skill set? Well, I would say, when I started in my role as chief well-being officer for Deloitte 8 years ago, what we were teaching people was, nutrition and how the way we eat affects our energy and how we show up. Exercise and movement and the importance of that, the importance of sleep and even rest and recovery. Largely, in my mind, things that individuals do or did outside of working hours.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so even though those are foundational key, they're really important and they should still be part of any organization's learning and development well-being programs, wherever they're positioned or wherever they sit. Those are foundational, they're key. They shouldn't go away, and I'm not saying that they're bad, but they are largely things that people do as individuals and largely outside of the workday. Now, some of it probably bleeds into the workday. You took a nap earlier, so certainly sleep bleeds into your
Yep.
workday, which I love. It bleeds into my workday quite often
Yeah.
too.
As it should, for
Right,
sure.
but we've given ourselves permission to that for that. So
Yeah.
I think there's that, right, that like what we've taught people are things that they do on their own. We haven't really taught people how, what does that mean is like, okay, so there's role modeling, we talk about
Yeah.
that a lot, right? But how do you lead through the lens of well-being? How do you create the environment, the culture that empowers and gives other people permission or inspires other people to do the same? Like, how do you make it a cultural norm,
Mm.
as a leader? And what does that look like? And that has to go way beyond programs and tools and resources. The programs, tools, resources, benefits, all foundational. They need to
Yep.
be there for people to take advantage of them. But if it's not ingrained and embedded into culture. And then I think we even need to take it one step further, which we'll get to when I talk about human sustainability, but like sustainable work, right? Like the way we're working right now isn't working.
Mm. Yeah.
We've been working the same way for, I don't know, at least 100 years, right? Yes, we have technology, and you can make as many arguments for why technology is bad as you can for why it's good, which
Yep.
means that technology isn't bad or good. It's how we're using it.
Yeah, you
Right?
once told me that I think we were talking about social media, but you said it's a bit like sugar, right? Sugar's not
Yeah.
bad per se if you have, your odd cupcake every now and then. If you're
Yeah.
eating a cupcake 3 times a day, then sugar is bad for you. And I think how we're interacting with technology is the same. And social is one thing, but email notifications always on. That is bad if we're using it in that way, right?
Yeah. And even the design of work, depending on how you do your work, how you get your work done, systems, the barriers in terms of like systems that don't talk to each other. Like, how many systems do I need to log into to get one task done, right?
Yeah.
that creates a lot of frustration. And so we're looking at and kind of talking about well-being as an outcome of well-designed work, right? Not every single day at work is going to be a great day, but overall, if you can look at the past year, did work enhance your well-being or did it detract from your well-being? Unfortunately, I think we're living in a time where people would almost 100% say that it detracted from their well-being. So how do we move the needle to redesign work or to allow people to redesign their work in a way that actually enhances their well-being? Because quite frankly, there's a lot of great things about work that are good for our well-being, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Social connection, doing something that challenges us or is difficult for us, doing things that are new, honing a skill that strengthens us. I'm just going to say it, making money.
Yeah, which is
Our
yeah,
financial
yeah,
sustainability is really important
yeah,
to our mental health in particular, right?
yeah.
And so there are a lot of good things about work. It's just that the design of work, the workload, the way we're working, is having more of an outsized and also leadership behaviors. And our research, leadership behaviors is actually the number one detractor of people's well-being at work.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done, but I am hopeful about it, actually.
Yeah, and you said a lot of really good stuff there, Jen. I think we've seen a lot of investment in solutions in the 8 years you've been since you were first chief wellbeing officer, and yet we've seen a rise in workplace stress and a rise in workplace burnout. Now, I did a provocative post on this a few weeks ago, and I was correctly called out that look, we do need those point solutions. They do work for the people
Hmm.
that use them,
Hmm.
but in isolation, they're not changing things, right?
Right.
And the thing that I guess as leaders of workplaces and as managers in workplaces and individuals in workplaces, the thing we have more control of is how we are working if we choose to make that a priority. So, how do we make the decision makers believe that looking at well-being is a good thing to do in terms of business success, business objectives, making profit, answering to shareholders and stakeholders, etc. How do we convince the most senior leaders that this is an important and necessary or even essential thing to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the good news is the majority of leaders that I talk to will all tell you that they know that the well-being of their workforce is important. Um, what they don't know or what they don't have time to focus on or do because we live in a really difficult, complicated world right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And so being a C-suite executive right now, like like it sucks for them too. Let's just be real, like they're humans, right?
100%.
And so so we got to give them some props. So I have yet to find a C-suite leader tell me that they don't care about the well-being
Yep,
of their workforce. Yes,
yep,
I'm sure there are some, but I have yet to have that conversation. And then the conversation moves to, well, I don't know what to do about it.
yeah,
Can you help me? Right? Because again, this goes back to well-being as a leadership skill set. On their path to becoming a C-suite leader, unless they're the head of HR, they were never told that they were or taught that they needed to deal with this, right? They were never taught that they needed to lead in a way that is positive to people's well-being or be a positive well-being role model. Like that
yeah,
wasn't part of the leadership skill set.
mm,
So they're kind of like, yeah, I think it's important. And by the way, I'm also investing a ton of money in these programs. And it's a little bit frustrating to me to continue to hear that they're not working, right? And so I think a lot of the C-suite executives are a little bit frustrated, the ones that feel like they're doing a lot of the right things and they're
yeah,
still not necessarily seeing the ROI.
yeah,
And so, at its most basic level, and this might sound trite, and it's not, like the C-suite and the workforce need to come together and have a real conversation. Like
yeah,
what I tell C-suite leaders is, if you don't know how to fix it, go ask your workforce.
yeah,
They'll tell you how to fix it.
yeah,
They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones that know the barriers. They're the ones that are feeling frustrated. They're the, like go have a real conversation. Then where that goes is, well, if I ask them what they want or what they need and I can't deliver on it, isn't that bad? And I say, no, it's not, because the simple fact that you asked them what they thought and what they wanted and what they needed goes a really long way. What you do then need to do is come back to them and say, I know we had this conversation. These are the changes we're going to make. And these are the changes that we can't make, and be
Yeah.
really transparent as to why. Right. And so for a lot of senior executives that I talk to, they're like, really, like that, like that's all that it's going to take. And I'm like, no, that's not all that it's going to take, but that's where it's got to start.
Yeah.
Because what we're seeing now is the workforce pointing the fingers at the C-suite saying they don't get it, they don't understand, they don't care. And the C-suite is saying, I'm investing all of this money and my workforce is still telling me that everything sucks. So what gives, right? And so what gives is like, we need to have real human conversations, which goes back to like being human needs to be a skill set.
Yes. Yeah. And if
Right.
you,
And so I think it's not going to fix everything, but
yeah,
until we're actually having these real conversations, we're not going to get anywhere.
yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And yeah, being more human, going over the correct shoulder is something that
Yeah.
we certainly live by here. But um, if you were to sort of define the characteristics of a senior leader with a well-being skill set, and you've touched on a few, but if you were to think about what are the top characteristics of someone that does this right and gets it, what would they be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think first and foremost, just the recognition of the role that the human plays in the workplace,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And what they bring to the workplace. I think that there is so much focus right now on AI and generative AI, and rightfully so. Um, and probably a lot less, but equally needed. Like the conversation around humanity needs to be in the same room as the conversation around generative AI.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
And so kind of recognizing a leader that kind of recognizes the value and the benefit of humanity in the workplace, and what that brings with it, the issues and the benefits, right? And invests in um, further things that further our humanity in the workplace, as opposed to only investing in technologies. Technologies are great, and I mean, I think there's a lot of promise for things like generative AI if we get it right.
Yeah, and I think if we get it right, but I think also if we then use the time created to have a more
Absolutely.
balanced life and work, to
And that's
have learning
exactly, yeah.
opportunities and enrich
And that's
the you know,
exactly where I was going. So if we are truly going to free up this time, recognizing then the value of the human in the workplace and celebrating that with giving them more meaningful work, giving them opportunities to do more learning and development, giving them opportunity, like those types of things. So I also, I mean, we hear a lot about, vulnerability and authenticity. Yes, of course, that's important. It's going to look different for everyone, but leaders do need to start showing up more human.
yeah,
There's still a lot of leaders that, kind of wear this brave face, this strong face. And the workforce is really, really, really smart right now, and they are tuned into these types of things and they call bullshit, and
yeah,
rightfully so.
yeah,
And so I think leaders need to find their voice when it comes to authenticity and vulnerability, and how they're going to put themselves out there. I think that personal brand, as a leader, is really important. And there's a lot of debate about this. I recognize that. But the workforce today wants to know what their leaders stand for.
yeah,
They want to know who their leader is. And I'm not talking about politics, right? Like, I'm not talking about, but they want to know who their leaders are.
yeah,
And so it's really, really important to have a personal brand so that people know who you are in the workplace.
mm,
I think that that's important. I think, gosh, there's a lot. I mean,
yeah,
obviously, and empathy, compassion, all of those things that you're right are kind of, like the soft skills that we've talked about. I talk about them as essential skills. I just think that honestly, those are far more important than any of the legacy or historical skills that we've been teaching leaders. Like, we just, I was going to say we just need to show up and be human, but I can't say just, right. Like, we need to show up and be human, because saying like, apparently it's hard
I think
because we're not doing it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's the model that people get promoted into leadership positions is not based on demonstrating those skill sets.
Right. Exactly.
So the way we're
We're not
assessing
rewarding those
future
behaviors.
leaders,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a big part for career
Yeah.
progression. As
And recognizing that when people have a life and passions outside of work, that actually makes them better at work.
it does,
You
yeah,
know, like that work can't and shouldn't be the only definition of who we are, right? And I know, in my own story, that's what led to burnout was that, I mean, I walked away from everything else in my life that was important to me and was completely consumed by my work. And that only made me worse at work. I mean, it made me a terrible wife, a
yeah,
terrible friend.
yeah.
I wasn't nice to myself, right? So we can't be consumed by work, and we need leaders that recognize, embody that, and promote it to others, like really push others, like you need to have a life outside of work, otherwise like this isn't going to work.
Yeah, I think it's protecting that the time for people. I've heard a
Yeah.
lovely example of a leader talking about well-being non-negotiables, which I talk about quite
Hmm.
a lot now. Of sharing what are the important things that you need to do as a team to look after your individual well-being, and then helping each other make sure they make those each week, whether it's the
Yeah.
book club or the soccer match or whatever it is. And for me, a personal example, as you know, like your husband, I'm a DJ, and if I'm not playing music regularly, I'm less effective in any of the things that I do professionally because I'm
Yeah.
not as energetic, I'm not as creative. I need to have that kind of relationship with music, and I think it's important that we protect those. I guess very aggressively that we make sure that we're scheduling them and prioritizing them, right?
Yeah, I mean, a personal example on my side, my team, everyone on my team has access to my calendar. They can see everything that's on my calendar.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, you can ask any single one of them. I have breakfast, lunch, dinner, two snacks, workout, and bedtime on my calendar because I need that kind of structure in my life. That tells you one thing about me. But it also, I mean, doctor's appointments are on my calendars. Like
Yep.
I am very transparent about, yeah, there, like, life happens and there's needs in my life, and I'm going to put it on my calendar because I expect all of you to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I've found that we make a joke out of it. Now they tell me when to go to bed, so,
So I have to
and
ask, what is Jen Fisher's bedtime on a school night?
yeah, about 9:30
Yeah,
p.m.
yeah,
And yeah, so but I start to get ready for bed way before. I mean, there's kind of a whole ritual leading
okay,
up to
yeah.
that, right? So there's kind of a whole hour before that. So yeah, when we were out friends the other night, I was making sure they knew how important and special they were, that I was still out at like 9 o'clock at night.
I hear you. Yeah, that would be my bedtime as well. It's 9:30,
Yeah.
but the wind down routine and the stuff you do before bed is really important, isn't it?
It is really important. Yeah. And I mean, I've learned that for, a long time ago, especially when I was traveling a lot and recognizing that when I traveled, I just didn't get the good quality and, quantity of sleep that I wanted. And I came across an incredible book called Why We Sleep
Yep,
by Dr. Matthew Walker.
yep.
And that really changed my life and kind of my whole views around sleep and what I do. But yeah, I mean, I tell people that, I treat that hour leading up to when I go to sleep, much like we do with kids, like,
Yeah,
hey, go take a bath, brush
yep,
your teeth, get in bed, and, mom or dad will come read you a story.
yeah,
And so that is a bedtime ritual that done every single day or most days,
yeah.
is a signal to your body and brain of like, oh, okay, I'm winding down, I'm getting ready for sleep. So that for me, somebody that lives with anxiety, nighttime can be a
Mm.
bitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the heart can start racing and the thoughts are racing. And so if I don't do that, I often find that, I might fall asleep, but I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the
Yeah,
morning and just the anxiety will be pumping, and so
yeah.
that is one of the ways that I really ensure that I sleep well.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for sharing about those challenges, and I think one of my guests on this show is a kind of scientist, and I saw a study that he shared that when you travel, they've mapped, like, if you look at the two hemispheres of the brain, one of them basically stays awake and
Yeah, because
alert
it's an
because
unfamiliar,
yeah,
it's yeah, it's like survival. Yeah,
yeah,
Matthew Walker talks about that in his book too. So, yeah, so the first night away is always no matter what you do, you still don't sleep. But then you kind of then, the longer that you stay somewhere, the better your sleep becomes. But yeah, it's kind of our primitive brain saying, "Wait, I'm going to be on the lookout."
yeah, yeah, 100%. So look, let's get into human sustainability, and again, links very nicely with the thoughts on future of well-being. Why have you made that change, and why do you think? Tell me about human sustainability and why you think this is the kind of future.
Yeah, I mean the kind of current working definition, because I will say I'm all of 6 weeks into the new role, so so we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
But the current working definition is really this long-term and collective view, not just of individual well-being, but how individual, organization, climate, and society are all interconnected. And why we should be taking this holistic view of all of these things, because they're all impacting all of us, right? Either on an individual level, at an organizational level, within our communities. We're in the middle of summer right now. I'm sure, regardless of where you live in the world, we've all seen the news on what how climate is affecting. I was watching this morning. I don't know if you saw it, Rob. The wildfires in
yeah,
Maui, which are it's heartbreaking
yeah,
and devastating. So I think it was just, this desire of mine to, part of it was to evolve, but also at Deloitte, one of the unique things about, at least in our firm in the US, is we have a purpose office, a specific purpose office, and the goal of the purpose office and the purpose officer is to help define and make investments into the things in our communities in which the firm cares about. And
yeah,
so our purpose as an organization there's four pillars. There's equity, trust, climate sustainability, and social impact. And so the conversations started happening between myself when I was the chief well-being officer and our chief purpose officer. And I said something along the lines of, I love the purpose of our organization, but we're going to have a really hard time reaching our goals and aspirations in those four areas if we aren't also looking after the humans
yeah,
that are kind of making the decisions that impact these things daily, right? It is the humans that are making decisions around policy, around the way that we work, around the choices that we make in our personal life when it comes to climate and sustainability, right? And so it was kind of this beautiful moment that he and I had together where he just like started laughing and he was like, "Oh shit, you're right, Jen, but I just thought you had it all taken care of." And
brilliant.
I said, "Well, thank you, but I don't." But also, I think, look, there's a lot of well-intended people and organizations that are doing amazing things in all of these areas, but we're tackling them kind of as individual things,
Mm,
and without the recognition or appreciation that what we do in one area can have a very positive or very negative impact in another
yeah,
area. But they're all very human issues. Equity is a very human issue. Trust, trust in our governments, trust in one another, trust in our employer, trust in our healthcare systems. I mean, the list can go on, right? Like, these are all very human issues that are centered on humans that are making decisions. And if the humans are unwell, um, and
yeah,
the way we're working is unwell, and the way that we're living, or the way that we're working isn't sustainable, the way we're living isn't sustainable, then what the heck are we doing? So
yeah,
so it's really kind of this collective long-term view, right? And I think the important thing, and I said it probably a little bit differently earlier, is we need to start taking a long-term view on these things, because this gets back to what you and I were talking about, Rob, is there's a lot of organizations and leaders that are investing in programs and tools and resources to meet the need in a moment,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's not a bad thing,
Mhm.
but there's not a long-term plan for these types of things. And so that's my goal, is to say, hey, like, human health and well-being needs to have a long-term plan, just like everything else in our organizations that do. So
Yeah.
that's the current trajectory or working definition of human sustainability.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And kind of you've touched on well-being sort of being in a workplace an outcome measure of how well we're structuring the way that we're working. Presumably, well-being could be quite a good outcome measure to some of those other aspects of human sustainability. If we get
Absolutely.
the environment right, and we start
Yeah.
changing the damage that we've done, the next generation may feel a little bit less stressed about
They'll be able to breathe.
that they'll be able to breathe in the future, and what are their children going to look like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I think if we can kind of use well-being as a means of seeing how well we're doing as societies, as governments, as workplaces. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's a
Yeah.
big thing, right? But it could be the way forward, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. I mean, I think human well-being is the foundation of all of to get all of those things right. I think we have to solve for human well-being as part of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be really hard because again, humans are the ones making decisions, and personalizing it, especially when it comes to things like climate change. I've been reading a lot about the psychology behind climate change and why people don't necessarily do anything about it because it feels so big and so overwhelming and so confusing. And there's a lot of terminology, and people don't always understand what the terminology means. Human behavior says, okay, well, I'm just going to pretend that it's not there, or I'm just going to kind of go inside, or I'm just going to adopt this belief that me not using plastic straws isn't going to actually save the earth.
Yeah.
Right, but the point being is that if every single one of us stopped using plastic straws, yeah, it actually would have a huge impact, right? And so we need to kind of get out of our own ways to say that it's up to the government to save. Yes, the governments need to make significant decisions when it comes to these things. Same thing with healthcare. I know healthcare is different across the world, but there's these big issues that it requires individuals, organizations, you're right, governments, and I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about organizations, government, like it's going to require all of us in every capacity to change the way that we behave and think around these things to get to a brighter future, I think, or a more sustainable future, I
Yeah.
guess is the right language.
Yeah, more sustainable for sure. Yeah, two things spring to mind. One is that very famous TED talk of the shirtless guy in a field starts dancing on his own at a festival,
Mm,
and then someone follows him, and then you've got a crowd eventually, and this
yeah,
idea of creating a movement and creating a movement in the right way. Um, I think the other point that springs to mind is those characteristics of the leader with a well-being skill set are kind of the characteristics we want of the people making some of these big decisions in kind of governments
absolutely. Yeah.
and everywhere else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, those are, those are leaders, right? Those are leaders of every kind,
Yeah,
so leaders in our organizations and our governments and our schools and education and healthcare, like across the board. I think it applies.
yeah, yeah. And we've both heard the same talk around kind of the measure of a society's success of growth of GDP being a very
Yeah.
outdated and ineffective measure. Again, the happiness or the health and the well-being of people, that's got to lead to better outcomes in some of these big decisions, hasn't it?
I firmly believe that. I think there's data that shows that, but I don't think that we're, I mean, you know me, I'm a huge advocate, and I know that there are people that will debate me, but I am a huge advocate on public reporting of some of this,
Mm.
aggregated health and well-being data of our
Yeah,
workforce and of our societal populations, right? Because I think that is one way to um, really enact change. I mean, we have to measure these things to understand them,
yep,
to then actually create appropriate solutions. Otherwise, we're just guessing.
yeah,
We're guessing at what's going to work, and we have no way to understand whether or not the solutions that we're applying are having an impact or not. And so we have to find some standard measurements and metrics for these kinds of things that we can that we can look at and that we can agree upon. But I know that that's a touchy subject for some people. I just think that it's the only way forward. If we don't come to some standardized agreement on what matters and
Yeah.
we actually measure it, we're not going to take the right steps to change it.
Yeah, I think that's the point: is the standardized agreement of what we're measuring.
Hmm.
And there are a
Yeah.
few good questions in well-being that you can measure, and hopefully will get
Hmm.
adopted. I think the other bit is organisations choosing to take those measurements and understand what is behind it.
Yeah.
I think mandating it is one way of doing it, but I think what we want to see are leaders really wanting to understand, okay, what is the well-being of my organisation and what is driving it? What is the well-being of the population and what is driving it? And then act on those results. That's the kind of utopia. But I'm preaching to the converted, right?
Well, I mean, I think the way to get there is to, make well-being a leadership. I mean, if you have leaders that understand and appreciate that and
Yeah.
lead that way themselves, they should naturally want to understand the data and the metrics behind it. But I think we have a ways until we get there. And so I'm not opposed to some mandates along the way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. So I asked you, Jen, to choose a piece of music, a song that boosts your well-being, and I'm putting together a Spotify playlist on this of my guests on the show. You chose a lovely track by Amy Macdonald, "Woman of the World." Why that track? Why does that boost your well-being?
I mean, first of all, I love the beat. Like, it's a very upbeat song. It has
Yeah,
a like kind of a great beat. I listen to it in the mornings when I take my dog for a walk. But I also I find the lyrics to be empowering. I find them to be fun, and I think just engaging, and kind of this recognition of the impact that women have on the world, and that we should always that we should appreciate it perhaps more than we do.
100%. I'm with you. So let's play a little bit of "Woman of the World" by Amy Macdonald. Here we go.
You had it all, and then you threw it all away. You had control, but now I'm taking it away. It's all a game, and I'm the winner with the prize. I've got my soul, I've got my love, I've got my life, and nothing feels
Such a great
the
voice.
same tonight, but something had to change. I'm not just someone else's girl, I am a woman of the world.
Amazing, really good choice, Jen. Thank you for sharing that. And again, it's almost the soundtrack to this discussion we've been having, right? The change required.
Yeah.
And we probably do need more women making some of the decisions that we've just been talking about, I would say.
I'm not going to debate you on that.
100%, 100%. So a little bit of a quick fire round. I haven't asked you to prepare these questions.
I'm never good at this, but I'll
Okay.
try.
I'd be interested to hear what you come up with. So I'm going to ask you just a few. If the future of well-being were a something, what would that something be? Okay. So if the future of well-being were a color, what color comes to mind for you, Jen?
Hot pink.
Hot pink. I love it. I've seen you wear hot pink quite regularly. So yeah, brilliant, hot pink. I don't think we even need to explain why. It just is out there, right? Very cool. If the future of well-being were an animal, what would it be?
Oh, the future of well-being were an animal. Gotta go with an elephant.
Elephant. Yeah. Okay. Why an elephant?
Yeah. Emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
community.
Yeah.
They care for one another.
Yeah. Like it. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it. And you better get out of their way because they're coming through.
Yeah,
Right?
an elephant stampede is pretty dangerous.
yeah, they're coming through. The future of well-being is coming through. If the
So it's a movement.
It's a movement for sure.
Yeah.
An unstoppable one. If the future of well-being were a place, where is that place for you?
The world.
The world. Love it. Why?
Because I mean, that's how it needs to happen. This needs to be a worldwide movement. It's not a single place, right? That it really requires all of us.
I love it. That's the best answer I've ever had to the question. With no disrespect to my wonderful other guests, that's a great answer. And then the toughest one is, if the future of well-being were a food, what would it be for you?
I mean, can I go back to red velvet cupcakes?
You don't really need to go any further than that, do you? You know, a 20% of the time pleasure. Absolutely, you can have that one. Thank you. That is the quick fire round. So obviously there's a lot of kind of people that would listen to this show or watch this show that work in well-being. What would be your kind of one top tip of, if someone is looking to really take this agenda forward, what would be your tip to other well-being professionals?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it. Doing your part to foster these real conversations, in particular with senior leaders that are making the decisions within our organizations. And I think that it's important to say that, to go back to what you and I talked about, is that, go in with the mindset that these leaders do care about well-being. But I think you have to figure out what it is that is going to get them to act, or to take action. And so if you're talking to a CFO, what's the role that a CFO plays? If you're talking to a CIO or a technology leader, what's the role? And talk to them on their terms as opposed to on your terms, to get them to see it through their lens and bring their ideas forward through the lens of finance, through the lens of technology, through the lens of operations, because then I think they're more likely to own it and to be able to understand how they can act on it, or how they understand how to help them understand how the decisions and the actions that they take in their worlds impact people's well-being.
Yeah, I love that. Just really think about it from their perspective.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Make it easy for them, right? Make it easy for them to.
Because, like I said, well-being. If we want well-being to be an outcome of a well-designed work experience, technology impacts our well-being. Yeah. Finance and operations impact our well-being. How we get our job. I mean, all of those things impact our well-being. So talk to them through that lens and what they can control and what they're familiar with, right? Because then they're going to say, okay, wait, I'm comfortable with this conversation now. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, I love that. Really good. Really good. Thank you. And I'm going to ask you for any recommendations of what you're reading and watching at the moment. We will definitely link to your TEDx that I recommend everyone looks at.
Thank you.
We're going to be sending that out to our mailing list this week. I'd also recommend your newsletter as well, which I enjoy reading. So we'll put a link to the sign up for that. But what else are you reading at the moment that you think is?
Yeah, I'm never reading just one thing.
Yeah, I do know that. Yeah.
But I would say that the book that I'm not completely through yet, but I'm almost done, is the book Outlive by Peter Attia. Okay. If that is of something that is of interest to you, but largely talks about more of like the preventative steps that we can take to live. It's about health span, not just about lifespan. So living longer and living better as we age. And so I have found that to be really interesting and fascinating. So that's one book I would recommend. Fantastic. But you mentioned my newsletter. I did just do a whole edition of my newsletter on my summer reading. So there's I think 7 or 8 recommendations in there, including Outlive. Yeah.
We'll link to that and those. But yeah, that will be my reading sorted for my forthcoming vacation. Jen, thank you so much. It's been a fabulous discussion, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on the new role, and congratulations on that and your TEDx. This is the Future of Wellbeing podcast with me, Rob Stevenson. Thank you to Jen Fisher. Thanks for listening and watching.
Thank you, Rob.